Hey everyone, this is Nathan Craig, and I'm going to be doing my sociology presentation on the current healthcare system in America and why I believe it should be, extensively reformed. Um, I feel like I should start off the presentation by basically describing why exactly I chose this subject and why I'm passionate about it. And the main reason is basically um, the far reach as far as like how many people this impacts in the country. Um, I have countless friends and family members and acquaintances and whoever that they have health insurance. They work full time, and they still have a hard time paying their health expenses. And I see that as a huge problem, given that we're the richest country in the world, and somehow we can't afford to provide health care for all of our citizens. I don't see that as like a debatable thing. And since it affects so many people around me and around everyone, I felt like it was a pretty good topic to go into and do some research on. Since I'm already pretty passionate about it, but there's always some more things I could learn. And I wanted to address the connections it has to sociology. Um, and while a lot of people might see the whole healthcare issue as like a political issue, even though I don't think it really should be, um, there are definitely a lot of connections to sociology, primarily its connections to its treatment of elderly people and poor people. Because, like it said in the textbook, there are a lot of situations, especially in this country, where um, basically elderly and poor people are seen as sort of like non-essential characters in the economy because they can't, well, a lot of the time they can't really contribute monetarily a whole lot. They don't have a lot to offer to the economy sometimes. And because of that, a lot of them tend to be left behind uh, in the whole economic scale, if that makes any sense. Um, and it shows because um, when it comes to the elderly, compared to the elderly in other countries, they are sick more often, like they go to the hospital more often, and they pay more for their care. They pay significantly more than elderly people in other countries. And I feel like that makes no sense. Um, and then even with like the poor, um, I mean, even though this technically affects everyone, I feel like it primarily affects the poor because obviously they don't have as much money to go around to pay for whatever they need. Um, but even though this isn't only affecting the poor, Americans pay way more for their health care than every other industrialized country, and then they get worse outcomes, just objectively worse outcomes for paying more money for it. And I just see it as a huge problem, and and it's getting worse now, considering the fact that like in Trump, I think it was Trump's first year alone, 3 million people lost health insurance, even though before that it was already like 30 million people were uninsured in the country, and now it spiked up by another 3 million. So I see a lot of connections to sociology that some people might not see, and that's fine if they don't. But yeah, I just see a lot of connections to sociology with regards to the healthcare system in the country. And so with that, I kind of wanted to get into the research I did first regarding the paper itself. I just stuck to academic material and peer-reviewed studies and stuff like that. But I mainly wanted to focus on what I did in person, like the research I did in person. And so the choice of art style I wanted to do was photography, because I've been a photographer for a while. And I know with these pictures it's hard to tell that because knowing me, I forgot my tripod at home, and it was dark outside at the hospital. So I brought my camera, and I was very wary, as far as what I could photograph and what not to photograph, because I didn't want to be that person. And so the first picture, if I do this correctly, the first picture you see if you scroll down is a sign that says something along the lines of like, "Oh, Tri-City Medical Center wishes you a happy holidays." And I don't know if it's just me, but I saw a bit more in that sign than some people might. I, I honestly saw the picture as, or the sign as kind of callous and like rosy eyed when maybe it shouldn't be. Because if you think about it, they're wishing you a happy holidays when there's a pretty good chance if you do go to the emergency room, there's a good chance you might go bankrupt. And they don't really mention that. They kind of seem like, oh, this is just a nice thing for people to see when they go to the emergency room before they get price gouged by health corporations and stuff like that. So I just saw that as really bizarre, honestly. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. And the second picture is the patient parking lot for the emergency room. And I think it says a lot that the lot is absolutely packed. It's almost completely full. Like I couldn't, and that's not the entire lot in that picture, mind you. There was quite a bit more out of the frame that I couldn't fit in, and I think it says a lot about basically the quality of care that these people are getting, to the point where, they're going to be coming back anyways, and they're going to be charged more and more and more for it, for their, whatever coverage they're getting. And a lot of people are just getting price gouged, and I just see it as a gigantic problem. I don't know. That's just a little bit of the symbolism I saw in the pictures that I took. But something I needed to bring up was what I couldn't photograph, but what I saw and I wanted to address in the presentation. So I went inside the emergency room and just sat down for a little bit and saw what I, just see what I could find. But I wasn't allowed to photograph in there. I didn't want to be that person again. But what I saw, there was one thing I saw that was really distressing, and it was I was sitting next to this elderly woman in a wheelchair, and she sort of had like a caretaker behind her that was supposed to be taking care of her. And then basically right when I sat down, maybe a minute later, she said, "Hey, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get something," or I didn't hear exactly what she said. But I was in there for about 20 minutes, and the woman just never came back. She just, I don't know. I don't know what she was doing, but it seems like she just left the person there, and that was it. I just found it really bizarre and kind of irresponsible, because there was no one else that was taking care of her at all. I don't know. It was just really bizarre, and I obviously couldn't photograph it. But I think the last thing I wanted to bring up was the other type of research that I did, which isn't the most reliable thing in the world because I don't have a whole lot of resources to do this with. But I made sort of a makeshift survey right here that I kind of brought around, and I asked the hospital employees if I could do this, and they said it was fine. So I went around and asked a few people, in the past 2 years, have you struggled to pay for your hospital bills? And it was just, a yes or no thing. And so let's see, I haven't even read this yet. So 19 people that I surveyed said yes, that they've struggled to pay their hospital bills in the past 2 years, and 4 said no. So if I'm doing the math, that's over 80% of the people saying, yes, I have struggled to pay my medical expenses in the past 2 years alone. And then only about 20% or less said that they were fine. And in the richest country in the world, I see that as a gigantic problem. And that was basically what my whole research revolved around. And I think that's about all I have to bring up. So, yeah, that was my presentation on the healthcare system in the United States.